Christmas is almost here. The lights, the laughter, the feeling of warmth filling every street. But tonight, I won't talk about joy or miracles. Instead, I'll tell you about 4 Christmas nights when everything turned cold and bloody. 4 true stories of families torn apart, of children who vanished into the dark, and of a beauty queen whose Christmas ended in death. Because sometimes, even the happiest season hides the deadliest crimes. The Santa Claus Massacre, Covina, California, 2008. It was Christmas Eve, a night that should have been filled with warmth, laughter, and the smell of cinnamon in the air. But inside a quiet neighborhood in Covina, California, a horror far beyond imagination was about to unfold. The Ortega family had gathered together, nearly 20 relatives, celebrating joyfully in their cozy suburban home. Children ran around with sparkling eyes, adults clinking glasses, and music playing softly in the background. It was supposed to be a perfect Christmas Eve until there came a knock on the door. Knock, knock, the kids shouted. It's Santa. Santa's here. Their little hearts jumped with excitement. 8-year-old Katrina ran to the door, arms open wide, ready to hug the jolly man in red. But the moment the door opened, everything changed. The man dressed as Santa pulled out 2 handguns from behind his back. Without a word, he fired. The first bullets tore through the air, striking the little girl who had welcomed him with a smile. Screams filled the room, panic, blood, chaos. In mere seconds, the joyful sounds of Christmas turned into a symphony of terror. The man continued to shoot, cold, mechanical, deliberate. Bodies fell. People tried to run, to hide, to shield their loved ones, but it was too late. When the gunfire stopped, 9 people lay dead. He then placed his gift bag down on the floor, and from it he pulled out a homemade flamethrower. He ignited the house. Flames erupted instantly, swallowing the walls, the curtains, the Christmas tree. Within minutes, the entire house was burning, a blazing inferno on what should have been a holy night. Neighbors watched in disbelief, hearing the screams but unable to do anything. By the time firefighters arrived, it was already too late. The killer's name was Bruce Jeffrey Pardo, a 45-year-old man once described as kind, quiet, and deeply religious. He had worked for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory for 9 years. People said he loved animals, that he smiled often, that he seemed incapable of violence. But behind that polite smile, something had broken. Just months earlier, Bruce had gone through a bitter divorce. He was ordered by the court to pay $10,000 to his ex-wife, lost his beloved dog, Saki, and couldn't retrieve a valuable wedding ring he had gifted her. Friends said he took it hard, very hard. He felt humiliated. And on that Christmas Eve, he decided to visit his ex-wife, not with forgiveness, but with revenge. Inside his Santa suit, he carried 4 guns, 200 rounds of ammunition, and a homemade flamethrower built from his own engineering skills. He even constructed a bomb, carefully hidden inside his car. Bruce drove to his former in-laws' home, where his ex-wife's family was celebrating their Christmas Eve party. When he finished his massacre and the house burned to ashes, Bruce had been badly burned himself. His Santa costume melted into his skin. He fled to his brother's house about 30 miles away. Sometime before dawn, he sat down, placed a pistol under his chin, and pulled the trigger. Police found his body on Christmas morning, next to 2 handguns and a half-burned Santa suit. His car, parked nearby, was wired with explosives, a trap designed to kill anyone who touched it. Luckily, it was discovered and defused before detonating. In total, 9 people died, including Bruce's ex-wife and her parents. The home, once filled with love and laughter, was reduced to black ashes and silence. Investigators later found a single note inside Bruce's burned home. It said only 2 words: "No more pain." Christmas Eve, 2008. The night Santa came, not to deliver gifts, but to bring hell on earth. The Lawson Family Christmas Tragedy, North Carolina, 1929. It was Christmas Day, 29. Snow fell softly over the hills of Lawsonville, North Carolina, covering everything in a pure white silence. Inside a modest farmhouse, a family of 9 prepared for what should have been a peaceful, joyful holiday together. Their names were the Lawsons, Charlie and Fanny, and their 7 children. Neighbors said they were hard-working, humble people who made a living growing tobacco. They were the kind of family everyone admired, close, loving, always together. No one could have guessed what darkness was about to come. Charlie Lawson was a man of few words. At 43 years old, he had built a simple life for his wife and kids. But something had changed in him. After a head injury while digging a ditch, he became moody, distant, unpredictable. A longtime friend recalled him once saying, "I'm not afraid to die, as long as I can take my family with me." At the time, no one took it seriously, but maybe they should have. That December, just days before Christmas, Charlie took his family into the nearby city of Winston-Salem. He bought them all new clothes, expensive ones, and even paid for a family portrait. For a poor tobacco farmer, it was strange. People thought he was simply being generous for the holidays. But that photo would soon become their memorial picture. On the morning of December 25th, as most families gathered around warm fires and laughter, the Lawsons' home grew quiet. The 2 eldest daughters, Carrie, 12, and Mabel, 7, were getting ready to visit relatives nearby. As they walked toward the barn, their father waited in the shadows behind the tobacco shed, a shotgun in his hands. He raised it. 2 shots echoed through the frozen air. Both girls fell instantly. Charlie calmly dragged their bodies into the barn, placed them neatly side by side, and covered them with hay. Then he walked back toward the house. Inside, his wife Fanny, 37 years old, was baking a Christmas cake for the family dinner. She never saw it coming. One blast from the shotgun ended her life instantly. The noise sent the rest of the children into panic. 17-year-old Marie, the eldest daughter, screamed and tried to protect her younger brothers James, 4, and Raymond, 2. But Charlie moved through the house like a man possessed. He shot Marie, then turned the gun on the 2 little boys. Finally, he reached the crib where the youngest, just a baby of 4 months, was sleeping. He crushed the infant's skull with the butt of his gun, and then silence. Only the crackle of the fireplace and the cold wind against the windows. After killing everyone he loved, Charlie walked out of the blood-soaked house and headed into the nearby woods. Hours passed. When the police, alerted by neighbors, arrived at the scene, they began their search. From the forest came a single sound, a gunshot. Charlie Lawson was dead, a self-inflicted wound to the chest. Beside his body lay footprints circling a tree, as if he had paced for hours before finally ending it. In his coat pocket, police found letters addressed to no one. Their content was unreadable, smudged by snow and blood. Back at the house, investigators discovered that each victim had been carefully arranged, their arms crossed over their chests, their heads resting on small pillows made of stone. It was as if Charlie wanted them to look peaceful, even in death. Only one member of the family survived, the eldest son, Arthur Lawson. By pure chance, he had been sent on an errand that morning and returned home to a nightmare he would never escape. For the rest of his life, Arthur lived with the haunting question, why? Why would his father do this? There was never a clear answer. Some said Charlie had suffered brain damage after his injury. Others whispered about family secrets, rumors of shame or even forbidden love between father and daughter. But nothing was ever proven. The case remained a mystery. The farmhouse quickly became a local legend, a place of death frozen in time. Curious visitors came to see it, to stare at the family portrait that had been taken just days before the massacre. All of them wearing their new clothes, all of them smiling, but those smiles captured forever hide a secret no one will ever truly know. They say that every Christmas night, when the snow begins to fall over North Carolina, you can still hear faint echoes in the woods near Lawsonville, a baby crying, and a man's low, broken voice whispering a prayer for forgiveness. The Vanished Children, The Santa Family Mystery, 1945. It was Christmas Eve, 1945, in the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia. The war had just ended. People were finally smiling again. Hope was returning to America. And inside one little house on a quiet hill, the Santa family gathered to celebrate the holiday. A mother, a father, and their 10 children. The Sodders were like any other hard-working Italian-American family. They ran a small trucking business. They were well-liked, respected, and that night their home glowed with the soft light of Christmas decorations. There was food, laughter, and the children couldn't wait to open their presents. Around 10 p.m., the youngest ones begged their mother, Jenny Sodder, "Please, Mama, can we stay up just a little longer?" They wanted to play with the new toys their sister had gifted them. Jenny smiled. It was Christmas, after all, and she agreed. She told them not to stay up too late. Then she and her husband George went to bed upstairs with 5 of their older children. That would be the last time she saw the little ones alive. Around 1 a.m., Jenny suddenly woke up. There was the smell of smoke. At first she thought it was a dream, until she opened her eyes and saw a thick black haze filling the hallway. Flames had already reached the living room. She screamed for George. They rushed to wake the others. One was shouting, choking, trying to find their children in the darkness. The house was on fire. Within minutes, the fire spread everywhere. 5 of the children, Maurice 14, Martha 12, Louis 10, Jenny 8, and Betty 6, were trapped upstairs. George tried to reach them, but the stairway was engulfed in flames. He ran outside, grabbed a ladder, but the ladder that had always been beside the house was gone, vanished. He tried to start his trucks to climb up to the window, but both trucks, perfectly fine the day before, refused to start. Every second was agony. Jenny screamed their names from below, her voice drowned out by the roar of fire. And then the roof collapsed. The family could only watch as their home burned to the ground with 5 of their children inside. When dawn came, nothing was left but ashes and silence. Firefighters finally arrived hours later, but when they searched through the ruins, they found no bodies. Not a single bone, not even fragments of skull or teeth. The experts said the fire hadn't been hot enough to destroy human remains completely. Something didn't make sense. Then came the strange discoveries. The phone line to the Sodder house had been cut, not burned. A neighbor reported seeing a man stealing parts from the Sodders' trucks earlier that week. Another said she saw someone throwing a fireball onto the roof before the blaze began. And the missing ladder. It was later found in a ditch far down the road. Jenny refused to believe her children were dead, and soon she began receiving signs that maybe, just maybe, that they weren't. Months passed. Then came the letters. People from all over the country began reporting sightings of the Sodder children. A woman in St. Louis claimed she'd seen 4 children matching their descriptions at a motel. Another in Florida said she saw them leaving with strange adults. A bus driver swore he saw the kids peering out of a car the very night the house burned. And then the photograph. More than 20 years later, in 1968, Jenny received an envelope in the mail. It had no return address. Inside was a single photo. A young man in his 20s, dark eyes, wavy hair, a half smile. On the back were handwritten words that made her blood run cold. Louis Sodder. "I love brother Frankie. I little boys, A90132. The boy looked exactly like her missing son, Louis. The same eyes, the same smile. Was it him? Had he grown up somewhere else under another name? They hired a private investigator, who traced the letter to Kentucky, but then disappeared himself, never to be found again. George and Jenny kept the photograph framed on their mantel until the day they died. They never rebuilt their home. Instead, they turned. The Murder of the Pageant Queen, Boulder, Colorado, 1996. It was the night of December 25th, 1996. Snow fell softly over the wealthy town of Boulder, Colorado. Christmas lights still flickered across quiet suburban streets, but inside one grand home, a nightmare was quietly waiting to begin. Her name was JonBenét Ramsey. 6 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, a smile that could melt hearts. To America, she was the face of innocence, a child beauty queen, polished, perfect, adored by millions. But behind the glitter and tiaras, behind the makeup and pageant lights, something sinister was brewing inside her perfect little world. That Christmas night, the Ramsey family had just returned from a friend's party. They laughed, exchanged gifts, and tucked the children into bed. Everything was calm. Everything was normal. Until the next morning. At 5:52 a.m., a panicked voice called 911. It was Patsy Ramsey, JonBenét's mother. She was hysterical. "Please hurry. Our daughter is gone. She's been kidnapped." When officers arrived, they found Patsy in a silk robe, trembling. On the kitchen counter lay a ransom note, 2.5 pages long, handwritten in perfect English. It demanded $118,000 for JonBenét's safe return, the exact amount of her father's Christmas bonus that year. The letter was strange, detailed, theatrical, almost as if the writer had watched too many crime movies. Investigators immediately felt something was off. The note had been written using paper and a pen from inside the house. There were no signs of forced entry. And strangely, the Ramseys didn't wait for the kidnappers to call. They invited friends and church members over to support them. By the time detectives could secure the scene, any trace of evidence was already contaminated. 7 hours later, JonBenét's father, John Ramsey, was searching the basement. And then he found her, in a small dark room behind a broken door, the lifeless body of his daughter. She was wrapped in a white blanket. Her hands were tied above her head with nylon cord. Her mouth was covered with duct tape. Around her neck, a garrote, a homemade strangling device made from a broken paintbrush handle. Her skull was fractured. She had been struck hard, then strangled to death. John lifted her body, sobbing, and carried her upstairs. The officers who saw that scene would never forget it. The glittering Christmas tree still stood in the living room, and beneath it lay the body of a child beauty queen. The autopsy confirmed the horror. JonBenét died from asphyxiation and blunt force trauma. But there were other findings, disturbing ones. DNA was found under her fingernails and in her underwear, yet it didn't match anyone in the family. Not her parents, not her brother, not any known suspect. The investigation spiraled out of control. Every headline, every newscast, America couldn't look away. People wanted answers, and when there were none, they began pointing fingers. At first, suspicion turned toward her parents. Critics said the ransom note was too theatrical, something only an insider could write. Why demand the exact amount of John's bonus? Why invite people over before police arrived? And why move the body? But others believed in a different story, one darker still. They whispered about Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's 9-year-old brother. That maybe there was an accident, a fight between siblings, and the parents covered it up to protect their son. The theory spread like wildfire, especially after a 2016 CBS documentary claimed the same. The Ramseys fought back. They sued the network and won. But by then the damage was done. The world had already judged them. Years passed. Suspects came and went. A former teacher named John Mark Carr confessed, saying he had loved JonBenét and killed her. But his DNA didn't match. Then came Gary Oliva, a convicted pedophile who claimed in a letter that he had accidentally killed her in a moment of passion. His DNA didn't match either. Every lead turned into another dead end. Every theory, another contradiction. And through it all, the image of JonBenét remained frozen in time, smiling, waving, wearing her tiny crown. Today, nearly 3 decades later, the case remains one of the most haunting mysteries in American history. The house still stands, a beautiful, cold reminder of what was lost. Tourists drive by. Some whisper prayers, others take pictures. but no one truly knows what happened in that basement. Was it a stranger who slipped inside that night? Or was the killer someone already within those walls? Someone who smiled at her one last time? Before the lights went out, Christmas, a time meant for joy and love, has always carried a shadow for the Ramsey family. And for the rest of us, JonBenét's story reminds us of something we'd rather not admit. That even behind the prettiest lights and the warmest smiles, evil sometimes wears a familiar face. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If you made it this far, you're truly one of the brave ones. Christmas reminds us that light and darkness always walk side by side, and tonight, we've seen just how deep that darkness can go. If you enjoyed these stories, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, so you won't miss the next chilling case I'll tell. Until then, sleep well and remember, some stories never end. They just wait for you to listen again.